2014's Frog Fractions was a browser-based game that owed much of its success to surprise, subversion, and being completely batshit insane. The game was chock full of referential humor and homages to gaming's past, but was best experienced knowing none of that, and discovering for yourself how wrong you were about what the game actually is. Frog Fractions 2, therefore, was at a disadvantage, since the audience already had an idea about what a Frog Fractions game is. Perhaps the most surprising aspect of the game was the 2-year ARG that led to its eventual discovery, nestled inside of another game on Steam, Glittermitten Grove. While the first game was largely a series of vignettes strung loosely together with a frog-based narrative, the second is a bit more conventional. Frog Fractions 2 shares its structure with the ASCII art games of the late 80s and early 90s like ZZT and NetHack. The overworld, called Text World in-game, is a top-down adventure where players must collect symbols, keys, and gear in order to progress. This aspect of the game is the most tiresome, especially for players with no point of reference for the genre. While the first game rarely let its gags overstay their welcome, the Text World section of Frog Fractions 2 was long, often tedious, and largely devoid of the wit and charm of its predecessor. There are parts where Text World changes drastically, and in ways best suited for environments the player has spent a lot of time in order to subvert their expectations. But the destination, in this case, isn't worth the journey. No, the better value proposition comes from the minigames scattered throughout Text World that gate some of the needed collectibles. These sections are much more in line with Frog Fractions 1 and feature a nice mashup of video game history and pop culture. Take, for instance, Toaster Derivatives, a combination of Flappy Bird and idle clicker games, where the player must buy and sell fuel in order to change altitude. These minigames, as well as the occasional shifts in Text World, are when Frog Fractions is at its most subversive, most humorous, and most enjoyable. You can never go home again. Frog Fractions 2 couldn't be as subversive or as surprising as its predecessor, but that doesn't mean it can't be at all. It's a game that rewards those with a wealthy knowledge and appreciation of gaming history and literature. It's also not content with being a direct sequel. Frog Fractions 2 actually tries something different, and while it may stumble a bit in its execution, the parts where the game succeeds are worth seeing. Taken as a whole, an ARG that led to a game, couched within another game, full of other mini-games, it's certainly a fascinating piece of media. And hey, Glittermitten Grove isn't half bad either.